The Rus were an early medieval group or people who gave their name to the lands of Russia, Ruthenia, and Belarus. Their nature, origin and identity are much in dispute. Most Western scholars believe them to be a group of Varangians, specifically Norsemen. According to the primary chronicle of Rus, compiled in about 1113 AD, the Rus had relocated from overseas, first to northeastern Europe, creating an early policy that finally came under the leadership of Rurik. Later, Rurik's relative Oleg captured Kiev, founding Kiev and Rus. The descendants of Rurik were the ruling dynasty of Rus, and of principalities created in the area formerly occupied by Kiev and Rus: Galicia, Volhynia Principality, Chernigov, Novgorod Republic, Kingdom of Rus, Vladimir Suzdal, Grand Duchy of Moscow, and the founders of the Tsardom of Russia. Etymology. According to the most prevalent theory, the name Rus, like the Finnish name for Sweden, is derived from an Old Norse term for the men who row, as rowing was the main method of navigating the rivers of Eastern Europe, and that it could be linked to the Swedish coastal area of Roslagen or Roden, as it was known in earlier times. The name Rus would then have the same origin as the Finnish and Estonian names for Sweden, Ruotsa and Ruotsi. History. Having settled Old AU in the 750s, Scandinavian colonists played an important role in the early ethnogenesis of the Rus people, and in the formation of the Rus Khaganate. The Varangians are first mentioned by the primary chronicle as having exacted tribute from the Slavic and Finnic tribes in 859. It was the time of rapid expansion of the Vikings in northern Europe. England began to pay Danegeld in 859, and the Curonians of Graben faced an invasion by the Swedes at about the same date. Due largely to geographic considerations, it is often argued that most of the Varangians who traveled and settled in the lands of Eastern Baltic, modern Russian Federation and lands to the south came from the area of modern Sweden. Most of these runestones can be seen today, and are a telling piece of historical evidence. The Varangian runestones tell of many notable Varangian expeditions, and even account for the fates of individual warriors and travelers. The Norsemen allegedly had some enduring influence in Rus, as testified by loanwords, such as Yabada, complaining person, Skote, cattle, and Naut. Moreover, three Nordic names of the first Varangian rulers also became popular among the later Rurikids and then among the East Slavic people in general: Oleg, Olga and Igor. Academic study. Normanism. The Western account of the Norsemen was introduced to Russians by the German historian Gerhard Friedrich Müller, who was invited to work in the Russian Academy of Sciences in 1748. At the beginning of an important speech in 1749, Müller declared that the glorious Scandinavians conquered all the Russian lands with their victorious arms. This statement caused much anger in the hearts of his Russian audience, and earned him much animosity during his professional career in Russia. The remainder of the speech represented a lengthy list of Russian defeats by the Germans and Swedes. Müller was forced to curtail his lecture by shouts of anger from the audience. The scathing criticism from Lomonosov, Krasheninnikov, and other Russian historians led to Müller being forced to suspend his work on the issue until Lomonosov's death. Although the printed text of the original lecture was destroyed, Müller managed to rework it and had it reprinted as Origines Russici in 1768. There were, however, some Russian historians who accepted this historical account, including Nikolai Karamzin and his disciple Mikhail Pogodin, gave credit to the claims of the primary chronicle that the Varangians were invited by East Slavs to rule over them and bring order. The theory was not without political implications. According to Karamzin, the Norse migration formed the basis and justification for Russian autocracy, and Pogodin used the theory to advance his view that Russia was immune to social upheavals and revolutions, because the Russian state originated from a voluntary treaty between the people of Novgorod and Varangian rulers. Genetic studies in their family tree DNA Rurikid dynasty project support the Norse theory. pinpointing the origin of the Monomakovich branch of Rurikid descendants DNA consistent with the North Germanic inhabitants of Upperland, north of Stockholm in Sweden. Anti-Normanism. Starting with Lomonosov, scholars from Eastern Europe have criticized the idea of Norse invaders. In the early 20th century, the traditional anti-Normanist doctrine seemed to have lost currency, but in Stalinist Russia, the anti-Normanist arguments were revived and adopted in official Soviet historiography. Mikhail Artemonov ranks among those who attempted to reconcile both theories by hypothesizing that the Kievan state united the Southern Rus and the Northern Rus into a single nation. The staunchest advocate of the anti-Normanist views in the post-World War II period was Boris Rybakov, who argued that the cultural level of the Varangians could not have warranted an invitation from the culturally advanced Slavs. This conclusion leads Slavicists to deny the primary chronicle, which writes that the Varangian Rus were invited by the native Slavs. Rybakov assumed that Nestor, putative author of the chronicle, was biased against the pro-Greek party of Vladimir Monomakhin and supported the pro-Scandinavian party of the ruling Prince Svitopolk. He cites Nestor as a pro-Scandinavian manipulator and compares his account of Rurak's invitation with numerous similar stories found in folklore around the world. There have been quite a few alternative, non-Normanist origins for the word Rus, although none was endorsed in the Western academic mainstream. Three early emperors of the Eurasian Empire at Caucasus from 8th to 6th century BC had their names Rusa I, Rusa II and Rusa III documented in cuneiform monuments. The medieval Ukrainian and Polish legend of three brothers, one named Rus, had also its predecessor in very similar legend from ancient Armenians with almost the same classical name. Furthermore, Kiev was founded centuries before the Rus rule, the ancient Sarmatian tribe of the Roxolani, from the Old Slavic name that meant river people. The Rus root is preserved in the modern Slavic and Russian words Ruslo, Rusalka, etc., from one of two rivers in Ukraine, Ros and Rusna, whose names are derived from a postulated Slavic term for water, akin to Rosa, a Slavic word Rusi, cognate with Rizai in English red, a postulated Proto-Slavic word for bear, cognate with Greek Arctos and Latin Ursus. According to F. Donald Logan, in 839, the Rus were Swedes. In 1043, the Rus were Slavs. The Scandinavians were assimilated and, unlike their brethren in England and in Normandy, they left little cultural heritage in Eastern Europe. This near absence of cultural traces is remarkable, and the Slavicists therefore call the Vikings cultural chameleons, who came, ruled and then disappeared, leaving little cultural trace in Eastern Europe. Beyond the Normanist, anti-Normanist debate, scholars such as Omelian Pritzik and Horace G. Lunt offer explanations that go beyond simplistic attempts to attribute ethnicity on prima facie interpretation of literary, philological, and archaeological evidence. They view the Rus as disparate, and often mutually antagonistic, clans of charismatic warriors and traders who formed wide-ranging networks across the North and Baltic seas. They were a multi-ethnic, multilingual and non-territorial community of sea nomads and trading settlements that contained numerous Norsemen, but equally Slavs, Balts, and Finns. Whilst all their names appear to have been originally Scandinavian, this might reflect the sacral position held by the island of Uppsala. Evidence provided by the primary chronicle, written some 3 centuries later, cannot be taken as an accurate ethnographic account, as tales of migration from distant lands were common literary topoi used by rulers to legitimize their contemporary rule whilst at the same time differentiating themselves from their Baltic and Slavic subject tribes. Tolochko argues, the story of the royal clan's journey is a device with its own function within the narrative of the chronicle. Yet if we take it for what it actually is, if we accept that it is not a documentary ethnographic description of the 10th century, but a medieval Origogentis masterfully constructed by a Christian cleric of the early 12th century. Then we have to reconsider the established scholarly narrative of the earliest phase of East European history, which owes so much to the primary chronicle. Numerous artifacts of Scandinavian affinity have been found in northern Russia. However, exchange between the north and southern shores of the Baltic had occurred since the Iron Age. Northern Russia and adjacent Finnic lands had become a profitable meeting ground for peoples of diverse origins, especially for the trade of furs, and attracted by the presence of Oriental silver from the mid-8th century AD. There is an undeniable presence of goods and people of Scandinavian origin. However, the predominant people remained the local hunter-gatherers. The increasing volume of trade and internal competition necessitated higher forms of organization. The Rus appeared to emulate aspects of Khazar political organization, hence the appearance of a Rus Chaganus in the Carolingian court in 839. Legitimization was sought by way of adopting a Christian and linguistically Slavic high culture that became the Kievan Rus. The burials attributed to the Kievan Rus have only a superficial resemblance to supposed Scandinavian prototypes, only the grave construction was similar, whilst the range of accompanying artifacts, the inclusion of weapons, horses and slave girls have no parallels in Scandinavia. Moreover, there is doubt if the emerging Kievan Rus were the same clan as the Rus who visited the Carolingians in 839 or who attacked Constantinople in 860 AD. The rise of Kiev itself is mysterious. Devoid of any silver dirham finds in the 8th century AD, it was situated west of the profitable fur and silver trade networks that spanned from the Baltic to the Muslim lands, via the Volga-Kama basins. At the Priman Hill in Kiev, fortifications and other symbols of consolidation and power appear from the 9th century, thus preceding the literary appearance of Rus in the Middle Dnieper region. By the 10th century, the lowlands around Kiev had extensive Slavic-styled settlements, and there is evidence of growing trade with the Byzantine lands. This might have attracted Rus movements, and a shift in power, from the north to Kiev. Thus, Kiev does not appear to have evolved from the infrastructure of the Scandinavian trade networks, but rather it forcibly took over them, as evidenced by the destruction of numerous earlier trade settlements in the north, including the famous Staraja Ladoga.